So next we have Hassan Khan. He is the CEO of TodaQ Financial and the co-founder and CEO of Quantius. Prior to that, during his time in the Army, he led all IT and telecommunications support for the Canadian Forces and directed technology policy for the Army, Navy, and Air Force in Central Canada. Hassan's next challenge was with the global consultancy at McKinsey & Company. He led the emerging market companies and countries achieve growth in their technology-related sectors and developed investment strategies for institutional investors focused on innovative SMEs in these markets. Please welcome Hassan to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. And I know I'm one of the probably last couple that's standing between you and lunch. What I'm going to do during my talk is probably approach it from a third direction. Not from the perspective of blockchain or AI, but from that of market and society. But hopefully that thread can connect to those other two in the middle. And leading on from Jane's comments, about a decade ago, and that's actually when I left the Army, and I was saying, all right, what am I going to do next? And everyone came to me and said, well, you got to think about finance or consulting. So I wandered off and ended up in New York and was invited to a networking event because I knew nothing about either of them. And when I showed up, it was a room full of investment bankers and traders. And I thought I had gone into one of the horror zombie films because everybody was shambling around at about 1/10 speed with a 1,000-yard stare in their face, and when I talked to them, I don't think anything was actually going in. It was, of course, 2008. The room was full of former Bear Stearns bankers who were still reeling in shock, and they were kind of going through their financial version of shell shock. Their pain, of course, was nothing compared to what Americans and many others around the world would feel in the months and years to follow. But at that time, I didn't know much about what would happen next. I just knew, and I said, you know what, this doesn't look like fun. I don't think this is why I was put on this earth. I'm going to try consulting. And then, of course, I joined, and they sent me straight back to Wall Street to work with those same insurance firms and investment banks that were sorting their way through the mess. Not what I had in mind. But at the same time, you can always make lemonade out of lemons. And it was a very, very valuable lesson, sorting through that wreckage and looking at the post-mortem of an ex-bubble. You know, more recently, I had the chance to listen in on several discussions, looking at our current tech and cryptocurrency market and all the various pros and cons and opinions of this is a bubble and no, it's not. The specific answer to that I don't find particularly interesting, but I'm actually here today for something else. I'm not here to provide answers or insights for you. We've got a bunch of very brilliant, motivated people in the room that have built some pretty incredible things. I'm very excited to see how those integrate to come to solutions. No, what I'm actually here for is to ask for your help and your insights. And hopefully pose a worthy challenge to a talented group. Why do we have economic bubbles? And given where we are going with decentralization and the potential of integrating blockchain and AI, is there anything we can do to actually mitigate or lessen the effects of something that seems to have been an eternal cycle? From the mortgage-backed securities bubble of recent memory, other property bubbles we had all over the world during the 2000s, commodities bubbles with gold and other metals in the 1970s, the roaring 20s, you can keep going back to the tulip mania in Holland in the 17th century. In fact, you can keep tracing this back as long as we've had civilization. We keep doing this again and again and again. and everyone here in this room has lived through at least one or two or three of these, even in your own personal memories. And each of those bubbles are followed by the inevitable pop. And the market and human misery that comes with it, we lose decades, sometimes a generation, in the recessions and depression that follow. And surely if we are building solutions, it's in order to alleviate our own condition, improve prosperity, and perhaps have a better way of conducting ourselves in society and how we do business. Now, I could plainly think about a bubble and say, okay, fine, there's some sort of asset or set of assets. They have a price. That price goes up until it goes far beyond whatever the intrinsic value is of the asset underneath. And along with that, the market exuberance causes debt and leverage rates to go up in turn, until sooner or later confidence breaks, the cycle stops, and whoever is left holding the check has to pay the bill on that debt. And I'm oversimplifying, but you can pretty much take every single bubble and devolve it back down to just this very one simple truth. But if we thought about why it happened, and whether it's in a work setting or socially, I've had a lot of discussions like this. And sometimes you get the more fundamental answer that, hey, it's because of human greed and pride and envy and sloth and all of our original sins, and it's inevitable. That's the way things can happen. But I'm an engineer. I'm an entrepreneur. I like building solutions, and I'm also a recovering ex-consultant, so I don't find that answer particularly satisfying or actionable. If we dig a little deeper and start saying, what are the very simple rules-based things that are being either broken or ignored that are causing these bubbles, is there anything there that will point us to insights that, given where we're going now, maybe we can create a better way of doing things? So if we do that, and I kind of go one step further, it really gets down to, in all cases, what is occurring is we have benefits, rights, and profits, and what's happening is those are being disconnected from their associated responsibilities, obligations, and costs. The ability to delay paying a bill or to shift that bill to someone else is essentially the underlying thing that is happening that is allowing a bubble to be created so that an unsustainable situation grows beyond the point where if you broke it sooner, you could have a much lesser fall and be able to fix it. And I'll tell you that starting in those late 2000s when I was wandering around in the wreckage, I was amazed, in fact my head spun, by the ingenuity of whether it was financial or business or other architects to come up with very elaborate designs in order to have that delaying or shifting of the cost occur. Because if you can win that game of musical chairs, well, who cares, right? But I think that most people, including us in the room, we do care, and there is something we can do about it. That's also important to note because often when new technologies come into play, we fall in love with them, and we have an over-exuberance there. When it was the internet, or even with blockchain. I'm obviously fully in that space and running with a wonderful team where we're actually deploying some great solutions around the world. But there's a tendency to look at the thing that comes in and then say, well, it's going to do everything from make my coffee to cure cancer. And it's important when looking at these technical solutions to understand what do they do very, very well and where are their limitations. And where there are limitations, where is it that people and organizations are going to build even sounder architectures around that so the technology is working together with us. If I look back again to 2008 and I thought about even going to university days, the most sophisticated we got was saying, well, who touches their nose last when the pizza delivery guy shows up, right? And that is kind of, I guess, the most simple bill delaying mechanism that I can think of that's pretty easily combated. But even listening today at whether it is all the various blockchain and decentralization and accountability technologies and what can be done with AI, it is amazing what humans will do, that even if you create a perfect technological system, they will work their way around it. The answer is we must fuse both the human and the technological element. You can only temporarily break this first law of economics, that nothing is free. So, with blockchain, what is that giving us as an ingredient in this solution? Well, now we're getting a rail that is allowing us to create an immutable proof of ownership history of an asset. But ownership is much broader than that. It also means accountability, responsibility, and that cost. And with AI, we have the potential for an engine that can actually handle the complexity, the timeliness, and the precision requirements to manage compliance within the world we are today. I think we're roughly at 2.5 quintillion bytes of data being added every day into our global economy. Things have gotten to a scale and to a size that for any one centralized body, person, set of persons, it doesn't matter how smart they are, it's moved beyond just our own capabilities. And this is one of the reasons why all of these centralized governance mechanisms we've created to try and regulate and prevent this boom and bust cycle have ultimately failed. So where is the question then? If we actually pull together blockchain and AI solutions at a low bottom-up level, can we create an ability to actually ensure that the bill cannot be delayed or shifted without the accountability going along with it? Because if there's one thing that would prevent a bubble, or at least lessen it, it's the ability to do that. I don't believe that this is going to remove failures. In fact, what I'm saying is we want failure to happen far more often and more frequently. And is that which then delays the calamitous events, that we don't want to do. And there's some that look and say, you know what, this sounds like a virtual parent overlord that is basically telling you to, clean your room, perhaps. But usually in cases where we hold each other to account, more rooms get cleaned than stay messy. On my end in particular, we're in the early phases of deploying exactly the same kind of decentralized solutions we've all been discussing into actual markets with financial solutions. And as all of those grow, a bunch of smart people in business and in finance and life are going to create things, and we're going to have new bubbles forming. I think it would be a great opportunity if we use the very same technologies that are allowing us to bring those solutions into place. We could also use those to create solutions to see what can we do to actually change the story. Thank you so much.